My name is Thaddeus. Everyone called me Thad. My best friend was Cornelius, but nobody ever called him that. To us, he was Cor. We grew up together in a small town in Ohio called Millhaven, the kind of town where the factories close and never open again, where the young people either leave or slowly disappear into the same tired streets their parents walked. Our mothers put us in the same church nursery when we were 6 months old. That is how far back this goes. We did not choose each other. Life put us together before we could even talk, and somehow, we stayed together anyway. I want you to understand something before I go further. This is not a scary story. I'm not trying to frighten you for no reason. I am telling you what happened because I believe it matters, maybe more than anything else I will ever say to another human being. So please, stay with me. Even if parts of this are hard to read, especially because parts of this are hard to read. Millhaven was a dying town long before Cor and I were born. The tire factory shut its doors in the early 80s. The glass factory closed not long after. Even the coal mine ran out of coal to give. Our fathers worked whatever jobs were left. Cor's father drove a delivery truck, waking up before the sun every single day. My father fixed roofs and furnaces for people who sometimes could only pay him in food because they did not have the cash. We grew up understanding, without anyone needing to explain it to us, that school was our only way out, our only real chance. Before all of that, though, before scholarships and worry and studying late into the night, we were just two boys who did not have much but did not know we were missing anything either. We spent whole summers down by Miller's Creek, catching fish with bamboo poles we made ourselves, using worms we dug up after it rained. We built a small fort in the woods behind his grandmother's house out of scrap wood we found near an old barn. It was not a good fort. It leaned to one side and let the rain in whenever it stormed. But we were proud of it anyway, the way boys are proud of things that took their own hands to build. We studied together most nights, once we got a little older and understood what was at stake. I remember sitting at his kitchen table, or mine, going over vocabulary words for the tests we needed to pass, writing essays for scholarships we were terrified we would not win. Our mothers worked long shifts, so it was often just the two of us in the quiet of an empty house, a single lamp on, both of us tired but pushing through anyway. Cor was always the smarter one. He was also the braver one, the one who could walk into any room and somehow make people like him within minutes, the one who never seemed nervous the way I always was. When we were 12 years old, he was the one who led me to accept my faith at a summer camp. We were sitting on the ground of an old canvas tent, crickets singing somewhere outside in the dark, and I remember both of us crying, not because we were sad but because something inside us had shifted in a way neither of us fully understood yet. He was the one who convinced our pastor to let us start a small worship band and youth group, even though neither of us could play very well at first. He was the one who organized food drives for families who had less than we did, and we did not have much ourselves. He knew Bible verses by heart the way other kids knew song lyrics, and he never seemed to show off about it. He just seemed to genuinely love it. He was, in every way that mattered to me back then, a good person, a kind person, someone I looked up to more than almost anyone else in my life. Our plan since we were maybe 14 years old was simple. We would both go to State University, a public school about 3 hours from home that gave out good scholarships to kids like us. We applied on the same night, sitting in his basement, both of us clicking submit at the exact same moment like it was some kind of small sacred ceremony. A few weeks later, Cor got his answer first. Full scholarship. Everything paid. He called me close to midnight, screaming so loud into the phone that I had to hold it away from my ear. I still remember that sound. Pure joy. Nothing complicated about it yet. My own acceptance did not come for another 6 weeks. By then Cor was already gone, off to orientation, starting his new life while I finished my last year of high school in the same tired hallways I had walked my whole life. The day he left for college, I drove him to the bus station in my father's old truck. He hugged me so hard I could feel his heart beating against my chest. He told me to save him a spot, that when I got to state we would be roommates, that we were going to take that place by storm together. I watched his bus pull away and disappear down the road, dust rising slowly behind it in the summer heat. I had no idea, none at all, that I was watching my best friend drive toward something that would eventually destroy him. I had no idea that the boy who taught me how to pray was about to forget, almost completely, how to do it. When I finally arrived at State University the following year, I expected to see my friend waiting for me. In some ways I did, but the young man who greeted me outside the dormitory was wearing my friend's face like it did not quite belong to him anymore. I saw him before he saw me. He was leaning against the brick wall, laughing loudly with a group of guys I did not know, guys who looked like they belonged in a magazine advertisement for expensive watches and boat shoes. His hair was longer now, styled carefully. He had traded his old glasses for contacts, and something about his eyes looked different. Harder, maybe. Or maybe I am only remembering it that way now after everything. He hugged me tight and called me brother, the way he always had. But when he pulled back, I caught the smell on him. Cigarettes, some kind of strong drink, and cologne that must have cost more than anything I owned. He looked at my clothes, at the old duffel bag my father had given me, and for just a second I saw something cross his face. Something like judgment. Something like he was quietly deciding whether I still fit into whatever new life he was building. He introduced me to his new friends that night. They called themselves by a name I will not repeat here, a kind of private group inside the official fraternity system, and it was clear from the way they talked that Core was becoming one of their leaders. These were boys from money. Real money. Family businesses, family names people recognized, family connections that opened doors most of us in Millhaven never knew existed. That first night, Core took me to the big house they rented off campus. It smelled like old beer and something else I could not quite name at the time, but now I know it was simply the smell of excess, of too much of everything, all the time. I mentioned our old youth group that night, hopping to find some piece of the friend I remembered. He laughed so hard he almost spilled his drink. He told me they did not do church anymore. He said something about Sunday mornings being for recovering, not worshiping. I laughed along with him because I did not know what else to do. I was 3 hours from home, lonely, unsure of myself, and he was the only familiar face in a place that felt completely foreign to me. Over the following weeks, I watched him change more and more. The occasional cigarette became 2 packs a day. The weekend drinking that started small became something that stretched from Thursday night all the way to Monday morning, with barely a pause for classes in between. And the way he treated the young women who came through that house broke something in me every time I saw it. He never seemed to remember their names. He would talk about them afterward using only some small detail, like it was the only thing worth remembering. It made my stomach turn every single time, but I said nothing. I told myself it was not my place to judge. I told myself he would come back to himself eventually, that this was just a season, a phase, something he would grow out of once real life started asking more of him. I want to explain something about that first semester, because I think it matters. I did not fall into that world all at once. Nobody does, I think. It happens slowly, one small compromise at a time, each one small enough on its own that you can talk yourself into believing it does not really count. I told myself that going to the parties did not mean I approved of what happened there. I told myself that staying quiet when I disagreed with something was simply being respectful, not cowardly. I told myself a lot of things during those early months, and looking back now, I can see how each one of those small lies was really just another step further away from who I had been raised to be. Everything I had once believed was treated as a joke in that house. Prayer was something people back home did because they did not know any better. Faith was called a way to control weak people. And Core, the same boy who had once wept with joy leading worship, now laughed the loudest at these jokes. I should have left. I think about this more than almost anything else. I should have asked for a different dorm room. I should have found the Christian group on campus and stayed close to people who still believed what I believed. I should have called my mother and told her I needed to come home. But I did not do any of those things. I stayed, because leaving felt like giving up on my best friend, and slowly, without even fully noticing it happening, I let him pull me down into the same darkness with him. It took about a year for me to change completely, though change is a strange word for what actually happened. It was not sudden. It was slow, like water slowly wearing away a rock until one day the rock is simply gone. At first, I fought it. I went to their parties, but I stood in the corner holding a soda, pretending not to notice what was happening around me. I watched the way some of the guys treated women like they were nothing more than a game to win, keeping score in ways I am ashamed to even describe. When I said something to Core about it once, he just laughed it off, told me I was overreacting, told me nobody was really getting hurt. But people were getting hurt. I saw it in the eyes of young women leaving those rooms late at night, looking for their shoes, looking for their friends, looking like something inside them had been taken without their permission. I said nothing. That silence still sits heavy on me. The mocking of my faith never stopped either. They gave me nicknames. They teased me constantly about being too serious, too careful, too much like the person I had been raised to be. One night during what they called an initiation, they poured beer over a Bible I was holding, laughing as the pages curled and the ink ran together. I remember standing there, not knowing whether to be angry or to laugh along just to make it stop. Core was the one who talked to me the most about all of it, late at night, back in our dorm room, when the whole campus had gone quiet. He would remind me how afraid we used to be as kids, afraid of doing something wrong, afraid of what might happen if we made a mistake. He said that fear had been used against us when we were too young to know better. He told me God, if God even existed the way we had been taught, surely understood that we were young, that our brains were not even finished developing yet. He said we could live now and figure the rest out later. He made it all sound reasonable. He always had a way of making things sound reasonable. Slowly I gave in. First I just stood near the drinks without touching them, telling myself I was only there to make sure everyone got home safely. Then one night in October he handed me a plastic cup filled with something sweet and strong, and I took it. I told myself it was just one drink, just to stop the questions, just to fit in for one night. I remember how it burned going down and then how warm everything felt after. It quieted a voice inside me that had been trying to warn me for months. It made the room feel brighter, the laughter feel easier, the whole night feel less like a mistake and more like an adventure. Core saw me drink it and his whole face lit up with something like pride. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me I had finally arrived. After that I stopped counting. One drink became two. Two became every weekend. Every weekend became every night. I started smoking, first because I thought it made me look older, then because I genuinely could not go long without it. I started talking to women the same careless way the others did, seeing them as something to win rather than someone to know. I started mocking the same faith that had once meant everything to me, because it was easier than admitting how far I had drifted from it. By my third year, I was fully part of their group. I remember the night of that ceremony clearly, kneeling in a basement, repeating words that were supposed to bind me to these young men, the way I had once been bound to something much bigger than myself. I felt a strange kind of relief that night, the relief of finally belonging somewhere, even if that somewhere was slowly killing something inside me. I told myself over and over that this was simply what college was. I told myself I would return to my faith once real life began, once I had a job and responsibilities and no more excuses. I told myself God was patient, that He understood young people needed time to figure things out. I repeated these lies to myself so many times that eventually they stopped feeling like lies at all. I did not notice, not really, when Core stopped even mentioning the idea of coming back to faith someday. He stopped pretending there would be a later. He was living only in the present now, burning through everything he had, his health, his character, whatever was left of his soul, with the kind of desperate energy of someone who somewhere deep down already knew there was no later coming for him. Our last year of school, there was a big party planned at a lake house that one of the guys' families owned. It was meant to be one final celebration before we all scattered into our different futures. Core had become fixated on a young woman he had not yet managed to impress, and he was determined to change that before graduation. He borrowed his father's large black SUV for the trip. We started drinking early that day, hours before we were even supposed to leave. By the time we climbed into the vehicle, all three of us, myself, Core, and another friend from our group named Thatcher, we were far past the point where any of us should have been getting behind a wheel. Core insisted on driving anyway. I sat beside him. Thatcher sat in the back. The radio was loud. We were all laughing about nothing in particular. The kind of laughing that happens when you have had too much to drink and not enough sense left to be afraid. I remember pieces of that drive, not the whole thing, just pieces. I remember Core talking about his plans, about the job waiting for him in a big city, about how this was only the beginning for all of us. I remember Thatcher quiet in the back seat, staring out the window. I remember the sun setting, painting the sky in colors I had never really noticed before. Then came the curve in the road. It was sharper than it looked, and Core was driving far faster than he should have been. None of us said a word to stop him. We felt untouchable that night, the way young people sometimes do, like nothing bad could ever actually reach us. I remember the sound of the tires. I remember the world tilting sideways in a way that did not feel real. I remember Core's face changing in that last second, his usual easy smile disappearing completely, replaced by something like shock. I remember Thatcher shouting something from the back seat that I could not make out. Then there was the sound of metal folding, glass breaking, a noise unlike anything I had ever heard before. And then there was nothing at all. I learned later that Core and Thatcher died right away. The crash was that violent. I was the only one who survived, though for 9 days no one was certain I would. I want to tell you what happened during those 9 days, and I want to be careful here, because I do not want to add anything that did not happen, and I do not want to leave out anything that did. I am not asking you to believe every detail exactly as I experienced it. I am only asking you to hear it, and to sit with it for a moment before deciding what you think. On what I later learned was the third night in the hospital, something happened that I still cannot fully explain, even now, even after years of trying. I became aware that I was no longer only inside my body. It felt like rising slowly upward, like a small light lifting away from something heavy. I found myself looking down at the hospital bed, and it took me a moment to understand that the broken, swollen figure lying there, connected to tubes and machines, was me. I was not alone in that room. There was a presence there with me, though I find it difficult to describe in a way that does it justice. It was not something I could look at directly, not exactly. It gave off a kind of light that did not simply brighten the room but seemed to announce that something far beyond human understanding had entered it. I did not feel afraid exactly, though I also did not feel completely at ease. I felt small. I felt seen in a way I had never been seen before, every part of me known at once, nothing hidden. I understood, without any words being spoken aloud, that I was meant to go somewhere. The hospital room around me began to fade, not the way a dream fades but more like something crumbling apart piece by piece, until there was only darkness left. A deep, heavy darkness that felt like it had weight to it, pressing in from every direction. What followed was a kind of descent, though it did not feel like falling exactly. It felt more like slowly sinking through something thick, something that resisted every movement, the way you might imagine trying to walk through deep water, except there was no water there, only darkness with weight to it. The air, if I can even call it that, grew heavier the further down I went. There was a smell that grew stronger too, something sharp and unpleasant, mixed with something else underneath it that I can only describe as the smell of something good gone terribly wrong, like fruit left too long in the sun. I heard sounds during that descent that I still have trouble putting into words, even now, even after years of trying to explain this to people. They were not simply sounds I heard with my ears. They seemed to move through whatever I had become in that place, causing a kind of fear that had nothing to do with my body because I no longer had one there, not in the way I understood a body before. There was crying. There was suffering. There was a kind of grief in those sounds that suggested loss beyond anything I had ever known in my life up to that point. Loss that seemed to go on without any end in sight. I do not know how long that descent lasted. Time did not seem to work the same way in that place. There were no landmarks, nothing to measure how far I had gone, only the growing sense that I was moving towards somewhere I did not want to be, somewhere far from anything good, somewhere I would have turned back from immediately if I had been given any choice in the matter. But I do not believe I was given a choice. I believe I was meant to see what I was about to see, whether I wanted to or not, for reasons I only began to understand much later. Then I saw him. I recognized him immediately, even in that darkness, even in whatever strange and terrible circumstance he was in. It was Core, my Core, the boy who had taught me to fish in the creek behind our houses, the boy who had led me to my faith when we were only 12 years old, the boy who I had once believed was one of the kindest people I would ever know. Seeing him there broke something inside me that I am not sure has ever fully healed. He was suspended above something that looked like a lake of fire, though even that description does not quite capture what I saw. The flames moved in ways that did not seem natural, rising and pulling toward him like they wanted to reach him, and yet somehow they never quite did. I understood, in a way I cannot fully explain, that this was part of the suffering itself, the constant nearness of something terrible without ever finding relief in it one way or the other. I will not describe every detail of what I witnessed happening to him there. Some of it I do not think I am meant to repeat, and some of it I simply do not have the words for, even after all this time trying to find them. I will say that his suffering seemed connected, somehow, not only to the choices he had made for himself, but to the influence he had carried into so many other lives around him. I was shown, though I could not tell you exactly how it was shown to me, glimpses of people he had once known, people whose paths had been changed, and not for the better because of decisions he had made and encouraged in others. I saw faces I recognized from that big rented house, young women who had passed through his life and mine during those college years. I was shown, in a way I still find hard to put into simple words, how some of those choices had followed them long after they left that house, shaping decisions they made years later, relationships they struggled to trust, a quiet distance from faith that had crept into their lives without them fully realizing where it had come from. I do not say this to place blame that is not mine to place. I only say it because it was shown to me, and because it changed the way I understand the weight of the things we do when we think no one important is watching, when we think the moment does not matter beyond itself. I also saw younger faces, boys who had looked up to Core the way freshmen sometimes look up to older students who seem confident and sure of themselves. I saw pieces of their own stories unfolding, patterns repeating themselves in ways that felt heavier than coincidence. I do not fully understand everything I was shown that night, and I am not going to pretend I do. I only know that it left me with a much deeper sense of how connected our choices really are, how far the ripples travel from a single stone dropped into water, long after we ourselves have stopped thinking about the moment we dropped it. At one point in the middle of all of it, he became aware that I was there. I do not know how to explain the look that passed between us in that moment. It was recognition, yes, but it was also something far heavier. Regret, maybe, more complete and more painful than any regret I had ever witnessed on a living face. He was not able to speak to me the way we used to speak to each other, sitting on his porch as kids or driving down back roads with the windows open. But somehow I understood what he wanted me to know. He wanted me to understand that his pain was not really about the small mistakes people usually think of when they imagine judgment. It was not about the smoking, or the drinking, or even the way he had treated people, though all of that mattered too. It was about something deeper than that. It was about a choice he had made, again and again, to turn away from the one thing that could have saved him, even when he knew better, even when he had once believed with his whole heart. He showed me, in whatever way that place allows such things to be shown, how much he wished he could go back. Not to fix small mistakes, but to make one different decision, the decision to turn back toward his faith instead of walking further away from it. He wanted me to know that he had never truly stopped believing it was real. He had simply chosen, over and over, to ignore it, telling himself there would always be more time. I understood, somehow, that there would be no more time for him now. I felt the presence that had brought me there communicate something to me as well, something about how what had been decided could not be undone, not because there was no mercy left in the universe, but because the opportunity to receive it had already passed for him. It is one of the hardest things I have ever had to accept, and I still do not fully understand all of it. I only know what I saw and what I felt, and how completely it changed the way I look at every single day I am given afterward. I came back to my body the same way I had left it, though it felt far more violent going back in than it had leaving. I woke up gasping, the machines around me suddenly screaming with alarms, nurses rushing in from every direction. I remember crying, though it was not only from the pain in my body. It was from everything I had just witnessed, still fresh and raw inside me. Cor was buried 5 days later in a small cemetery not far from where we grew up. I was still in a wheelchair, my neck locked in a brace, weak from surgery and days of lying still. I remember sitting there during the service, listening to people talk about accidents and tragedy and lives cut short, and I remember thinking that none of them knew what I now knew. I did not know how to tell anyone. I am still, in some ways, learning how to tell people, even now, even after everything. My recovery took months. I moved slowly from a wheelchair to a walker, then to a cane, then finally to walking on my own again, though never quite the same way I had walked before. During that time, I read my Bible again, but differently than I ever had before. It no longer felt like something I had inherited from my parents or something I did out of habit. It felt like the truest thing I had ever encountered, describing realities I had now seen with my own eyes, even if I still struggle to fully explain what those eyes actually witnessed. I want to be honest with you about something important. Cor was not what most people would call a terrible person. He was not violent. He was not cruel in the way we usually picture cruelty. He was a college student, a friend, someone people genuinely liked. His mistakes were common ones, the kind so many young people make without a second thought. That is exactly why I need you to hear this. His suffering was never really about those individual mistakes. It was about something underneath all of it, a choice, made quietly, again and again, to turn away from the one thing that could have made all the difference. I have spent the years since that night trying to share this story with anyone willing to listen. Sometimes people listen closely. Sometimes they walk away shaking their heads. I understand both reactions. I am not asking you to be afraid. I am asking you to be honest with yourself, the same way I eventually had to be honest with myself. If you are reading this and thinking there is still plenty of time, that you can sort all of this out later once you are older, once things settle down, once life feels a little less complicated, I understand that feeling completely. I felt it too for years. But I am asking you gently, as someone who has seen what waiting can cost, to reconsider that timeline. Not out of fear, but out of love, the same love that Cor tried so hard to communicate to me in that terrible place, even after it was too late for him. I do not know everything about how all of this works. I am not a preacher, and I do not have every answer. I only know what I experienced, and I know how much it changed the way I see every single ordinary day I am given now. I do not take mornings for granted anymore. I do not assume tomorrow the way I once did. If there is one thing I hope you take from this story, it is simply this. Do not wait. Whatever it is you have been putting off, whatever decision you have been telling yourself you will make someday, consider making it today instead. Not because of fear, but because life is far shorter and far more fragile than any of us like to admit, even when we know it deep down. I think about Core almost every day. I think about his laugh, the real one from before everything changed, back when we were just two boys fishing in a creek behind our houses with no idea what the future held for either of us. I think about the way he used to close his eyes when he sang during worship practice, like nothing else in the world existed in that moment. I choose to remember him that way as often as I can, even while carrying the weight of everything else I witnessed. It is not easy to hold both of those pictures of him in my mind at the same time, the boy I loved and the man I watched suffer. But I try, because I think he deserves to be remembered as more than just his worst years. There are still days when the weight of all of this feels like too much to carry. I will not pretend otherwise. I have sat in my car in empty parking lots and cried until I could not breathe right. I have questioned, more than once, whether I remembered everything correctly, whether my mind was simply protecting itself from the trauma of the crash in some strange way. I do not have a perfect answer to that question, and I am not going to pretend that I do. All I can tell you is that whatever I experienced changed me completely, in ways no ordinary dream or hallucination ever could have. I am not the same person who got into that Escalade on that summer evening, and I do not think I ever will be again. I do not tell this story to make myself feel important, or to convince you that my experience proves some larger point beyond doubt. I tell it because I made a promise, and because I believe with everything in me that there is still time for the people reading these words to make a different choice than the one my friend made. That is really all I want. Not for you to be afraid of me, or afraid of this story, but for you to take seriously the idea that today matters more than we usually give it credit for. Somewhere out there tonight, someone is telling themselves the same thing Core used to tell himself, that there is still plenty of time, that the serious decisions can wait until later, until things settle down, until life feels less complicated. I understand that thinking completely because I once thought the exact same way, but I am asking you, as gently and as honestly as I know how, to reconsider that thinking, not because I want to scare you into anything. Because I love you, in whatever small way one stranger can love another through a page like this. And because I never want anyone else to end up learning this lesson the way I did. This is my story, told as honestly and as carefully as I know how to tell it. I am not asking you to be afraid. I am only asking you to think, really think, about what matters most, and to not put off the things that matter most for even one more day. Tomorrow is not something any of us are actually promised, no matter how certain it feels while we are living through today. Thank you for staying with me through all of this. It means more than you know, more than I probably even know how to say.